On today's Locked On Jayhawks, we're previewing the KU versus BYU game.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Derek Johnson, you can hear me as well Monday through Friday from 3 to 6 p.m. on KLWN in Lawrence with Rock Chalk Sports Talk. Thanks for making Locked On Jayhawks your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get any of your podcasts. You can also find us on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. Today's episode, we're previewing the Kansas BYU game. We're going to get into our matchups of the game, and we're going to get on to our Jayhawks to watch, players to watch, Hawks to soar in this one for KU. First, though, this episode of the show is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. So Kansas takes on BYU. Game is at 2:30 p.m. Central Time. It'll be played in Lawrence at David Booth Kansas Memorial Stadium. It is the Big 12 opener for Kansas. It is the Big 12 opener for the, entire school history of BYU after joining into the conference this year. Only one other meeting in program history between these two went favorable to KU. It was the 1992 Aloha Bowl, so 31 years ago, and obviously that'll be one that a lot of Kansas diehards from the football side will remember. Dan Eicloff kicked the game-winning field goal for Kansas. They win 23-20. Chip Hillary was the quarterback at the time for KU. Kwame Lassiter, Sr., was the leading tackler for KU in the end, and they came through with the victory there to earn the bowl win. So that's the only meeting between the two. I think the top storylines headed into this one, it is partially that Big 12 opener for Kansas, their Big 12 opener, a 3-0 start in the non-con, the impressive win over Illinois. How much of a real Big 12 contender are you here? Are we talking about this team being a bowl team? Are we talking about them being a team that wins more games than last year? Or are we talking about this team being one that, maybe they can at least put a scare into the Big 12 title race this year? Well, you got to show out in a game like this if that's what you want to be. From BYU's perspective, their first ever Big 12 game. And obviously the question you have when you have teams that come over from non-Power 5s into Power 5s is how are they going to do over the long haul of the season in conference play where it is a little tougher each day and it's going to test your depth a little bit more than your previous stop. BYU is a little bit different, though, than some of those other schools that, maybe have come over from conferences where you don't have that week in, week out test where, BYU still has not played a Power 5 type of schedule each and every week, but they've had seasons where they've played 5, 6, 7 Power 5 opponents. So they've been pretty much close to it as you can get, which you would think they'd be able to weather the storm maybe a little bit more than some other teams who have to come over, but it doesn't really matter in this game because it's their first conference game, so you don't have to worry about that attrition early on in the season. Another big storyline here is, can Kansas get to 4-0 for the first time in back-to-back seasons since 1913, 1914, 1915? They did it 3 straight seasons in the early 1900s. It is unbelievable how long it has been since they've even had back-to-back 4-0 seasons. You go back to the Orange Bowl year, they go 4-0, but the next year they lose one of their first 4 games. So this is not, something they have done in a very, very long time, certainly not in modern college football. This would be a big deal for the program. And you heard Lance Leipold all week talking about, we're not going to apologize for wins over Nevada. Yes, there are certain things we need to work on and get better at, and we're going to look at the tape and do those things. We're not going to apologize for winning. This program has not been in a spot where you can overlook any win. And honestly, you should never overlook a win ever, regardless of what you're looking at. Enjoy what you can over the course of the journey because that is what makes the ride so much fun. And so this is a big opportunity for Kansas to do something they haven't done in over 100 years, which makes it a big deal. How much will the Nevada game hurt KU? How much will the Nevada game help KU headed into this week? Where I say hurt is because of the travel logistics. You had to come back Sunday, practice Sunday after traveling back. You played a night game. You had to change up maybe some of your schedules or your body clocks on a different time zone to adjust to playing in that game. You come off altitude, then you come back. How much did that affect your week of practice, right? Did you have guys who were maybe a little more lethargic in practice, or Was it not an issue at all? I don't know. There were a lot of travel logistics they had to undergo in the Nevada game that you wonder, does it have any residual impact on this week's game? Maybe it won't. Maybe it won't matter, but just kind of an interesting question. The other side of it is how much does the Nevada game help Kansas? Because yes, you won the game, but it wasn't KU's best performance. There's a lot of things they can show on tape or that they can feel like they can do better this week. And sometimes it can be good to kind of reset your focus. We hear all the time, like, you learn a lot in losses. Well, why can't you learn a lot in wins? That would be a great opportunity against Nevada and exactly how that game went for you to learn on the fly in a win, that you still got the win, but you did a lot of things that you feel like you want to do better this week. So you would think the focus and the attention span will be very good for this week. Maybe you do, have to worry about, do you look ahead to the Texas game? I don't think it would be, though. And especially because of the Nevada game, I think it's pretty clear that you would reset your focus, especially after what BYU did in beating an Arkansas team on the road that you lost to in your bowl game. I think that very much grabs KU's attention, and this is very much not a situation where you feel like Kansas is going to sleepwalk into this game. I think this will have Kansas all out attention, and it might have regardless of what happened in the Nevada game, but I don't think it hurts that you didn't have your best performance, and now you're going to be wanting to chomp at the bit and have your full attention into this BYU game. The last storyline I have here is how would rain or inclement weather possibly affect things? I don't know if it will be raining. I don't know if it will be thunderstorm. There might not. Been kind of differing weather forecasts throughout the week. If there is, how does it affect things? Again, there might not be, and it might not have an impact. If there is a lightning delay, how does that affect things, momentum of the game or whatnot? Last year, we saw Kansas overcome a lightning delay against Houston, and they came out charged up after the lightning delay happened and just kind of put it on Houston from there. In terms of the rain, Kansas has already had some fumbling problems this season. Could that be something that affects it more with the rain? And specifically when I think of, running offenses, you think those are the offenses that do better in the rain because you don't have to worry about passing the ball and holding on to it and catching it in the rain. On paper, Kansas has the much better running attack. They're averaging over 200 yards rushing per game. BYU is closer to 80 yards rushing per game. Then again, though, BYU is more of a power style running. KU is more of a read option style running, and you would think that the read option style would maybe be more susceptible in the rain to having problems. So how will that affect things if it ends up happening? I think will be an interesting question in a game like this. As far as the BYU scouting report, they're 3-0 coming into the season. They rank number 47 in the country on the ESPN SP+. They're coming off that Arkansas win, which they won 38-31, despite the fact they were out-yarded by a good amount. They also won 14-0 to Sam Houston earlier this year and 41-16 against Southern Utah. Offensively, they're number 21 in the country on Pro Football Focus's power rankings. For what it's worth, KU's defense is only 100th. They're also 46th on offense on ESPN's SP+. KU's defense is 93rd there. Slower tempo team. They're not going to run a ton of plays for the game. They're very balanced, led by Keaton Slovis, former USC Pittsburgh quarterback. He's been solid overall. He's been solid kind of against pressure. Throwing to every level has been good, except really deep balls haven't been elite so far. And he really throws or excels so far this year, throwing intermediate right and short to the left. BYU hasn't put up a ton of production or yards so far. They're only averaging about 300 yards per game. They have some good targets on the outside, but they have really struggled to run the ball. Brian Borland, KU defense coordinator, said earlier this week, though, that he thinks the offense is much better than maybe the stats would show. As far as the defensive side of the ball for BYU, they're number 82 on Pro Football Focus's power rankings. KU's offense is 23rd. But they're also 58th on ESPN's SP+ defensively, with the KU offense being 26th there. I think this defense is a lot better than that, and they've been really good to start this year. It's hard to find the weaknesses through their first 3 games. Now, maybe you could say they haven't played the toughest schedule yet to help with those. That's fine, but they haven't shown any really weaknesses so far. They run like a 4-2-5. They're going to be a bit multiple. They'll send some blitzes at you. They have 2 good linebackers. They've got a solid D-line. Tyler Batty is really good at the defensive end spot. And they've got a secondary with a lot of added transfer talent that seemingly has transitioned so far on the defensive end of the ball. All right, we're going to get on to our matchups of the game. First, though, this episode of the show is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available, which is why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. And it's super easy to create a job posting on LinkedIn Jobs, which means you're going to save time on your work. And because it's presentable and going to come out very clean, in addition to being fast and easy to make, you're going to get more applicants. Add your job in purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on the candidates with just the right skills and experiences so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. You want to add that right team member, especially as we finish out 2023 and get closer to 2024. Small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs number one in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Matchups of the game. Let's start with first down. KU's discipline, avoiding penalties, turnover margin, whatever you want to describe as discipline. That's how I view it. I view it as the things you view as like coached in, right? You're avoiding penalties, doing dumb things, catching passes you're supposed to, avoiding bad turnovers, holding on to the football. KU's discipline is going to be so important in this game. You go back to the Nevada game. KU had way too many penalties, especially penalties in some key spots that really cost them last week. And that's what got Arkansas in trouble against BYU. Arkansas out-yarded BYU by a big amount. They had over 400 yards. They held BYU to under 300 yards. But the difference was BYU was +1 in turnover margin against Arkansas, and Arkansas had 125 penalty yards. So they were the less disciplined team, and it cost them. BYU ended up winning the game by 7 points on the road. Be the more disciplined team here, or at least make that a wash. Also, for what it's worth, Kansas is 5-2 under Lance Leipold when having 0 turnovers. That's going to be tough to do. BYU has forced multiple turnovers in every game this season. They already have 5 interceptions through their first 3 games. They've been ball hawking at the back end, and Kansas has turned the ball over at least once every game. They've had their fumble troubles. So can you avoid the dumb penalties? Can you avoid the bad turnovers? Can you have a clean turnover game where you have 0 turnovers for the first game this season? If you do, I feel great about KU's chances in this game. If you have 2 or 3 of them, or it's raining, or it's sloppy, that's where you run into some trouble. Second down, BYU's defensive ends against the KU offensive tackles. And really all day long, the battle of the trenches is going to be so important in this game. It's a BYU team that's got some big bodies. They are physical. They like to hit you. Well, for Kansas, we know the defensive line has been pretty impressive so far with some good depth, but this will be a good test. And the offensive line has been really good so far this season. So when you look at the BYU defensive ends, Isaiah Bogna, I might be mispronouncing that. Apologies if I am. He's a transfer from Boise State. He had 10 career sacks before he came over to BYU, so he had some career sacks there. Tyler Batty is the star at the defensive end position. He had a career high just last week, 9 tackles, and he's a really good pass rusher. Even Jackson Cravens is really good. He's rated a 75 right now on Pro Football Focus. I don't know if you'll see him some on the interior or the exterior, but they've got some good defensive linemen. Meanwhile, the KU offensive tackles have been really strong so far this season. Dom Pooney has a 92 pass block grade on Pro Football Focus. Overall, his grade's really good too. Bryce Cabledew, again, also overall really good grade. He has an 80 pass block grade. So your 2 offensive tackles have been exquisite so far in pass protection and overall this season. And for what it's worth, the whole KU offensive line has been good. Mike Nowitzki's a 65, which is, that's fine. Every other KU starting offensive lineman is above a 70 right now with their overall grade. You've gotten great numbers all across the board from your offensive line, but especially those 2 offensive tackles. And for that reason, I think this is a strength on strength matchup. Who ends up winning that matchup more? Maybe it determines the game. Maybe in the end, this ends up being a wash and the other things determine it. But if one side wins over the other, when you view the other one to be a strength, then all of a sudden it becomes a big gain for the team that wins that matchup. Third down is third downs. So BYU right now offensively has struggled a bit on third downs. They're only converting 30% of their third downs. Even in the Arkansas game that they won on the road and put up 38 points, they only went 4 of 13 on third down. So this hasn't been a great start to them in converting those key moments. And for Kansas, meanwhile, you're looking at the defense side of the ball. You've prevented teams or teams are converting 35% against the defense. That's a solid number so far this year. So you feel good about how that can go. Just don't let this be the game that it reverts to BYU. Now, the flip side of the ball, third down is obviously important for the other way. Kansas is converting 63% of their third downs. That is top 2 in the conference. Meanwhile, BYU's defense is only allowing 28% on third downs, which is best in the conference. Third downs are obviously so critical and so important, keeping the drive alive, scoring touchdown instead of a field goal, scoring instead of punting. There's so many things that third downs contribute to over the course of the game that make it one of the most important stats in all of football. And so it's no secret that it's going to be a key every game. But in a game where they have struggled at it and you have been great at it, where their defense has been great at it, your defense has been pretty good at it, I think this becomes a very big thing and something that you feel like, okay, we have a good quarterback with Jalon Daniels. We should be able to convert more third downs than not. Fourth down here is the BYU linebackers against the KU running backs. Typically, you're going to figure, okay, the offensive line, defensive line, maybe they can be a wash for each other. Obviously there are going to be times where the D-line gets in and makes a tackle on a running back, or the running back gets by the linebackers and it's a safety or a corner making the stop, or depending where the ball goes. But for the most part, linebackers and running backs are kind of guarding each other, whether it's, man-to-man defense, or if it's, the linebacker has to read which hole the running back's going in, or the defensive tackle took up the blocks, and now it's just a one-on-one with the running back versus the linebacker, who's going to win that move. And you hear it all the time. The best running backs make the first guy miss. A lot of times that is the linebacker. KU's got good running backs. Devin Neal's a stud. He's pacing to be all conference, maybe even All-American. Daniel Highshaw, really good. As long as he can hold on to the football, is a really good player. Dylan McDuffie, you got a solid third string there from what you got. We know the KU running backs are very talented and can be very, impactful players. BYU linebackers are really good too. Ben Bywater had 102 tackles in 2021, 98 of them in 2022. He's already got 22 so far this season. He's a big dude. Both of their starting linebackers are. Bywater 6'3", 235. AJ Vongpachon is 6'3", 235 too. He was Utah State's top tackler in 2022, had over 200 career tackles, transferred to BYU. He just had 10 tackles last week against Arkansas. Both their linebackers are really good. It's going to be a good test for the KU running backs. Can you make that first guy miss and have a successful ground game against BYU? Now, as far as an individual player matchup to watch, I'm going with Jeremy Robinson versus Caleb Etienne. Etienne has started a tackle for BYU, or played a lot of reps for them on the outside. He struggled a bit this year. Robinson so far has been really solid for KU. He had that 2-sack game against Illinois. He's got 3 sacks on the season. He had a couple nice plays against Nevada as well. He's had a nice breakout year for the junior defensive end. Meanwhile, the BYU line, it's a physical, big offensive line, and that is no different than Etienne. Etienne is gigantic. 6'8", 330 pounds is what he is listed at. He is a mountain of a man, but he has struggled so far. He only has a 43 grade on Pro Football Focus. He only has a 37 grade in run blocking and a 53 grade in pass blocking. Kansas should have an opportunity to exploit him. I would imagine that, if he's struggling that big, maybe speed causes him an issue. So maybe even Austin Booker becomes somebody to keep an eye on here, which we'll get to that here in a moment. But Jeremy Robinson versus Caleb Etienne, when you're looking at how they typically match up or how they typically line up, that would be the most often matchup there. So look for possibly a big game from Jeremy Robinson. But if Etienne comes to play and takes Robinson out of the game, that would be a huge win for BYU. And if you can get pressure on Keaton Slovis, he's not an overly mobile quarterback. He will scramble a time or two. He has 3 rushing touchdowns this year. Interestingly enough, he had 0 coming into this season. But he at least has shown a bit of that, even though he has -2 rushing yards this season and -200 in his career. For the most part, if you can get pressure, you're going to be able to get him down. All right, let's get on to our Hawks to Soar Jayhawk players that could stick out on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. First, though, this episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. You can get in on the action with Kansas and BYU. You can bet on Kansas spread. You can bet on the over-under. I'm leaning toward the over right now. That might be my favorite bet for the time being. Still waiting for the player props to come up, but guess what? They're going to have them up eventually. We'll get to a player here who maybe you want to keep an eye on, but certainly I would think this is a game that you'd be looking for maybe some rushing touchdowns from Devin Neal. Usually the odds are lower. You could even get a Devin Neal 2+ rushing touchdown game, and that would probably be plus odds. They're also going to have some big boosts coming up for the following week, KU Texas. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, Hawks to Soar, players that could stick out this game for KU. Let's start with the offensive side of the ball. I'm going with Mason Fairchild. Fairchild just had his best game of the season receiving-wise. 5 catches for 74 yards. He was so close to his first touchdown. Oddly enough, he doesn't have a touchdown this year. Maybe that means he's due in a game like this. But BYU plays that 4-2-5 typically. That means you're playing an extra DB out there. That means that theoretically you might have a nickelback or a corner on a tight end, which means a little body advantage for Mason Fairchild. Maybe that means he's able to use that body to have another big game, and he has another big game back-to-back, and maybe KU puts an emphasis to get him a touchdown because he hasn't had one this year. I think Mason Fairchild is a good player to watch out for and would be very helpful in a game like this. BYU, sometimes they're going to get after you with 4 guys, and they'll be able to because they're very talented, but they will throw some aggression and blitz at you, which means that you're looking for a comfort blanket kind of looking or somebody that you can kind of quickly get the ball to over the middle. Mason Fairchild is your guy. Defensive side of the ball, I could go back to Jeremy Robinson. I'm going to go to Austin Booker. Whether it's ETN or some of these other BYU offensive linemen, they're big, they're strong, they're physical, they'll hit you hard. The question that I will have is how fast are they? How quick? How athletic are they? Maybe they answer that bell very well in this game. But Austin Booker has a unbelievable first step on him that I wonder if a game like this, especially after last game, he comes in the second half after missing the first half of targeting. Maybe he'll play with a little extra chip on his shoulder. I could see him using his speed to his advantage and having a big game in this one. And if he does get to Keaton Slovis, you're going to feel good about how Kansas, I think, looks up at the scoreboard at the end of the game. As far as the final score prediction, I said yesterday on the crossover pod, Kansas 31, BYU 28. So that'll be my prediction that I'm going to continue to roll with, which would put it on the over. It would take BYU spread. I think a close game, coin flip game. BYU could win this game. They're good enough to. You have to hold on to the ball. You have to play disciplined. But if Kansas plays their game, I think they should come out on top. All right, that'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get any of your podcasts. You can also find it on our YouTube page. Have a great rest of your day and see you next time with LOJ.